On today's show, upset alerts, an ACC battle, and South Carolina's path to the Final Four. With the Sweet 16 kicking off today, and in a few hours, Mitch Northam of SB Nation, who is live on site, is going to help me break down what to expect or not to expect from the Birmingham Regionals. The Locked On Women's Basketball Podcast. It starts right now.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome. You are locked on to women's basketball. I'm Jackie Powell, and happy Friday, happy Sweet 16. I'm one of your hosts on this program. I cover the New York Liberty at The Next, and I've covered women's basketball and its culture nationally at many other places. We want to thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. This episode is brought to you all by 5 Hour Energy. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from. Need one now? Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. Stock up today and stay energized. And joining me today is no stranger to the show. It is Mitch Northam, who is reporting to us live in Birmingham just hours before an ACC battle is about to go down. Mitch, how ready are you for the Sweet 16 to get rolling?
I'm very happy to be in Birmingham and, watching and covering college basketball. Yesterday was a full day of media stuff. Today we had more media stuff in the morning, and we got games today, and it's going to be really exciting. We got Carolina Duke on tap. We got South Carolina, Maryland. Birmingham, cool city so far. I'm going to see more of it, but yeah, excited to be here.
Absolutely. So to our listeners, I hope you all listened to yesterday's show with Chelsea, Leite and Bela Munson of The Next, which, as you all know, Locked On Women's Basketball is powered by. And those two broke down the Spokane regionals. So if you haven't taken that show in, I will link it to our show notes. But anyway, how today's preview show is going to go about Birmingham. Segment 1, we're going to talk about some potential upsets in this regional. Segment 2, we're going to get into that battle within the triangle. And for those who are not familiar with what I mean by the triangle, Mitch will explain. And then lastly, we're going to shift to all things South Carolina. And we're going to break down how the defending national champions can make it back to the Final Four. So, okay. So, Mitch, let's start out with some potential upsets in Birmingham. For me, just sort of taking a look at the bracket, I personally see two potential upsets in this double regional, in that matchup between TCU and Notre Dame, and then you have Texas and Tennessee. I mean, both of these games are tomorrow. They are not today. I guess I'm just curious from your end, am I completely off base here with anticipating that the chalk could be shaken up? What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I definitely think that Birmingham 3 regional is wide open. The one where you have Texas as the 1 seed, TCU is the 2, Notre Dame is the 3, and then Tennessee's sneaking as the 5. I really think that one could go either way. We could see any one of those teams make the Final Four. Texas, Tennessee is, your 5-1 matchup there. Tennessee played in Austin earlier this season and only lost by 4 points there. And that was without Kim Caldwell, who was out with her pregnancy. And so, I don't think Tennessee is going to be intimidated at all by Texas. And I think that, Tennessee kind of ended the regular season a little bit on a bit of a rocky road, lost a couple, heading into the SEC tournament. I think that the layoff, between the SEC tournament and the NCAA tournament, that bit of rest really helped them. They play at a really, really fast pace, and, they're the highest scoring team in the country. They get up a lot of shots. I think that style of play by the end of the regular season had kind of gassed them out a little bit. And then you saw them sort of bounce back in a big way, in that Ohio State regional where they were able to get not only a first round win, but beat the Buckeyes on their home floor in the second round. So I think that's a game that could certainly go Tennessee's way. And then you look at the other matchup between Notre Dame and TCU. And I know the TCU beat Notre Dame earlier this year, but that was in a game where Maddie Westbeld and Lisa Carlin didn't play in for the Irish. That was in late November down in the Cayman Islands, I believe. And I think when you're facing this TCU team and you have to go up against somebody like Savonia Prince, somebody like Maddie Westbeld, who is an all-ACC post player, can certainly help you a whole lot, her presence on the floor and in the paint. So I think that's a game, that can go Notre Dame's way. They're another team who, finished the regular season not the way they wanted to. They were the number one team in the country, as recently as mid-February. And, lost a couple, there down the stretch. I think the layoff helped them as well, just to kind of get their act together a little bit and sort of straighten some things out. So, yeah, I definitely think they have a good chance of beating TCU. And then, we'll see what happens in the Elite Eight. But I really like Notre Dame's chances to get to the Final Four.
I believe I picked Notre Dame of going to the Final Four on my bracket as well. I am very high on their high-power backcourt. But I think what I want to ask you, Mitch, about Notre Dame in particular is how has the dynamic between Hannah Hidalgo and Olivia Miles, how has that been as of late? Because sometimes it looks great, and then other times it seems like they're not on the same page when it comes to who's taking the shots, who is off the ball, who is on the ball. So what have you seen from that duo? Because we know that Sonia Citron is I'll compare her to Jackie Young. If you think about how Jackie Young functions on the Las Vegas Aces, very similar to how Sonia Citron functions on Notre Dame. So what have you been seeing out of that dynamic between those two guards leading up to this?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting because I think Olivia and Hannah both view the game a little bit similarly in that, like, they're sort of this, they kind of flow freely through the game. They sort of, Olivia has said many times that she kind of sees basketball as art and, sort of sees the court as her canvas and, just kind of feels her way through the game. And, they are both willing to take big risks in games, Olivia with kind of, head turning passes that her teammates might not quite be prepared for. Hannah with, sort of leaping in front of passing lanes, which a lot of times pays off. Sometimes it doesn't when she's playing defense. Both of them likes to shoot the three ball. Olivia a lot better as a 3-point shooter this year than she has been in years past. And so, yeah, I think like a lot of times when that dynamic is going well, it's very good. I think the key for Notre Dame is playing in transition. Like that's when those two players thrive the most, is like when they can get out and run and sort of let everything unfold in front of them. Whereas like when they get into the half court, I think this kind of your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn thing, trying to decide who is going to run the offense. I think that is where they've gotten into a little bit of trouble and things have been a little disjointed. So, when they can play fast and freely and transition and on the fast break, that's when those two are at their very best and coexist really, really well and, tandem really strongly. When they get into the half court, I think that's when things, they get a bit more rigid and both of those players don't exactly thrive in those certain, types of atmospheres. I'm reminded of the ACC tournament semifinals. That is what Duke did to them. Duke made them play in the half court. They really, really emphasized stopping them on the transitions. And that's how Duke was able to win that game. Duke made them play their style and really muck the game up. I do think that like they sort of got back to the basics a little bit in that second round win over Michigan. So I think that they figured some things out. I'm curious to see, if TCU is effective at sort of making them play in the half court. I have some questions about TCU's defensive abilities to do that. But we'll see. I think it's going to be a really good game, that the TCU Notre Dame matchup for sure.
Coming up, we're going to get into a battle that is beginning very soon, and that is Duke versus UNC. I want to tell y'all all about our good friends at 5 Hour Energy. So daylight savings snuck up on us again. And if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament, covering the NCAA tournament in person like Mitch, squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing, pick me up whenever you need it. I myself have been staying up late watching all the tournament action, and 5 Hour Energy helps keep me up the next day. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one now? Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. And we are back. I'm here with Mitch Northam. Okay, let's talk about this ACC triangle battle. For the listeners who don't really know why this is called a triangle battle, Mitch, can you just take us through why that is, and also why this matchup really, really means something?
Yes, so there's an area in central North Carolina that is referred to as the Research Triangle, and it's because of the three schools in this area, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Duke University in Durham, and NC State in Raleigh. And so they sort of create a triangle there in central North Carolina. That's where I live, there in Wake County. So I lived there for, I guess going on about 7 years now, and gotten to cover each of these teams very, very closely. And this is the first time ever that Duke and UNC are meeting in the women's NCAA tournament. And it's the first time since 2007 that all three of those schools have advanced to the Sweet 16. So I think this season is really a sign that all three of those schools are kind of have returned to the elite tier in women's college basketball. All three of them spent time in the top 10 of the AP poll this season. All three of them hosted first-round tournament games this year, first time since 1998 that's happened. It's the kind of the backstory here is, each of these teams had really, really good Hall of Fame coaches in the 90s and 2000s. You talk about Sylvia Hatchell at UNC, won a national championship in 1994, went to two more Final Fours with Ivory Latta in the mid-2000s. Kay Yao at NC State, who, is just one of the more iconic coaches we've ever had in the sport. Aside from her very public battle with cancer, won a whole lot of games, went to a Final Four with NC State, won some ACC titles, the whole thing. And then at Duke, you had Gail Gestencourse, who really built Duke basketball up into sort of what it was in the mid-90s and 2000s there. Went to 4 Final Fours, produced some all-time great players like Elena Beard. And then after that, you sort of had this downswing that all three of those programs experienced in the 2010s where, Sylvia Hatchell just didn't evolve as a head coach and was stuck in her ways. And she had to resign basically amid this scandal where she was basically accused of, using some inappropriate language that had some racial undertones, and was also accused of forcing players to play through injury and that sort of thing. So in 2019, she resigns, and Courtney Banghart takes this job. Then you have Duke, who things started well under Joanne P. McCauley, Gail Gestencourse's successor, when Gail decided to go to Texas. And things were good under Joanne for a while. They went to a couple Elite Eights, also produced some great players like Elizabeth Williams and Chelsea Gray. But towards the end of the 2010s, Coach P, really had some misses in recruiting and talent evaluation. Famously, did not get Bella Allery, whose father, Mark, played for Coach K. Famously, did not recruit Elizabeth Kitley, who goes to Virginia Tech and becomes a 3-time ACC Player of the Year. So those misses on talent evaluation and recruiting kind of caught up with her. Duke had some down years towards the end of the 2010s. And she resigns in 2020 in that summer amid the pandemic. And Duke decides to take a very big swing and hire Kara Lawson, who had no previous college coaching experience, but had coached with Team USA and was coaching with the Boston Celtics and, of course, played for Pat Summitt and, all the things. And so now Kara has carried that program. Then you go to NC State. After Kay Yao passed away in 2009, they hired who was then an up-and-coming head coach in Kelly Harper from Western Carolina. And first year was good. They made the NCAA tournament. Next 3 years, not so good. They missed the tournament every year. After that, she gets fired. And then Wes Moore is brought in, a former Kay Yao assistant coach who had been at Chattanooga, to rebuild that program. And now, Wes has had the most success, 5 of the past 6 years. He's been in the ACC tournament title game. He went to the Final Four last year, second time ever NC State has been there. So, yeah, I think this moment that we're seeing in Triangle women's basketball is really the sign that all 3 of these schools are back playing at that elite level that those Hall of Famers had them at once upon a time ago.
Yeah, I love all that history. I think that's really helpful in understanding why this really matters to people. It matters to the fans, it matters to the coaches, it matters to the players. So I think what I want to know from you next about this matchup is, what is it about the identities of these two teams that could make this like a pretty gritty basketball game?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of differences between Courtney Banghart and Kara Lawson in the way that, they carry themselves and run their programs and that sort of thing. One of the similarities is that they both really lean on and emphasize defense. Both of these squads rank in the top 10 in Her Hoop Stats defensive rating. They both force a lot of turnovers. I think you saw both of their defenses really at kind of the peak of their powers against other really good defensive teams in the second round, in Duke's win over Oregon and in UNC's win over West Virginia. They win both of those games, not scoring more than 59 points. So that's just an example of how good that they are defensively, that they can only score in the 50s and still win games. And that's not something that we see a whole lot of, in women's basketball. Usually when these two teams play, it's an absolute rock fight. When Duke and Carolina met in Carmichael in January in Chapel Hill, that game went to overtime and finished in the 50s. So, their second meeting, that was in, Duke's Cameron Indoor Stadium. Alyssa Utsby and Renaya Kelly didn't play for Carolina in that game, so you're down 2 starters. So Duke was able to pull away and win pretty comfortably in that one. I think that's a bit of an outlier in the series. For the most part, I think in each of their last 7 meetings, the winning team has not scored more than 68 points. And I think even that's a little bit high for what we might see later today on Friday. So I think, I keep telling people the final score is going to be like 57-53. And we'll see. We'll see if anybody actually shows up with some offense, but we're going to see 2 really good defensive teams trying to grind each other down into submission.
Oh yeah. I think another thing I want to ask you about this matchup is, I guess, what are really the keys to either team winning? So let's fill in the blank. If X happens, then North Carolina will win. If Y happens, then Duke is going to win. How do you sort of fill the X and Y for those, if that makes sense.
I think Duke wins if Toby Fournier has a good game. Like if we see her score in double figures and grab 7 or 8 rebounds or something like that. She did not play well in the first time that these two teams met. And then she did play well in the second time that they met in Cameron Indoor Stadium. I think the difference is that Alyssa Utsby played in one of those games and she did not in the second one. And so Alyssa Utsby and Toby Fournier are going to be matched up against each other a lot of times. They're a little bit of similar players, both of these kind of tweener forwards who are very athletic, really good rim runners. Toby has a really great touch, around the rim. She's also 5 years younger than Alyssa Utsby is. Toby's a freshman and Alyssa is a 5th-year senior at this point. But they're going to be matched up on each other quite a bit, I think. And, who wins that battle could have a determining factor in this. The other kind of position that I'll point to is both of these teams have 3-point shooters who are capable of getting really, really hot and kind of propelling them to a victory. For North Carolina, it's Lexi Donarski. In their first round win over Oregon State, that game was really close at halftime. Lexi comes out in the third quarter and hits 5 threes in that quarter. I mean, just kind of turned into Steph Curry there for a second, right? That really, helped UNC pull away and win pretty comfortably. Turn to Duke. In Duke's win over Oregon, Ashlyn Jackson comes out in the third quarter and hits 4 3-pointers. And so, both defenses keeping track of where those players are on the court at all times and not allowing them to get hot, I think is going to be super key. The other player that I'll point out is Renaya Kelly for North Carolina, the point guard. She's a sophomore. She is from this area. She grew up in Hoover, Alabama, where she scored more than 2,700 points as a high schooler and led her team to 4 state titles in this building that UNC and Duke are going to be playing in. So, we talked to Renaya Kelly yesterday during the media day. She was like so excited to be in Birmingham and so excited to be back in this building where she is 4-1 all time. So that's pretty cool. It's a cool storyline. I hope that she plays well. I think it'll make for an interesting game.
Oh yeah, it seems like there's a lot of personal ties at stake here. So coming up in our final segment, we are going to talk about the defending champions, the South Carolina Gamecocks, and what their journey to Tampa and the Final Four looks like, and if we think the Gamecocks have something to prove. That is coming up. Let me tell you all about our good friends at FanDuel. So, as we know, March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets. I have my eye on a few underdogs this year. Obviously, on the women's side, I really think Tennessee could do some really interesting things. Do I think they make the Final Four? I don't know, but I could really see them beating Texas. And FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Thank you very much, FanDuel. And I am back here with Mitch Northam. And so let's just get right into South Carolina. So South Carolina plays Maryland later today at 5 p.m. This is a team you also know very well. How much trouble could you see Maryland giving the Gamecocks? How close could this one be?
I think it has potential to be very close for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't think South Carolina is the monster that they were last year. I don't think they are the inevitable Death Star, Goliath, whatever you want to use to sort of describe them, that they were, in years past. Now, are they a very good team? Are they capable of winning the national title? Absolutely, 100%, of course. But I don't think they are simply just walking into games and steamrolling, really, really good opponents anymore. We saw last weekend, they started slow against Indiana and trailed at halftime. Now they came out in the second half and put their foot on the gas and that sort of thing. I think if they do that, though, in the Sweet 16 against Maryland or in the Elite Eight against Duke and Carolina, I think they're going to find themselves in trouble. I don't think South Carolina can afford to start slow against these type of teams at this stage in the tournament. I think one of the reasons why South Carolina is a little bit beatable this year is because they don't have that dominant center that all the great Dawn Staley teams have had. From Asia Wilson to Aaliyah Boston to Camila Cardoso, and this year they've already lost probably who was their best post player to injury in Ashlyn Watkins. Now, they went through the SEC, which you could argue is the best conference in women's college basketball, and they won that league and they won the SEC tournament. But I do think that there is a way that the right team at the right time with the right coach could beat them. Is Maryland that team? Maybe. Brenda Freese is a really good coach. Somebody who won a national championship, somebody who knows how to adapt and game plan and piece things together. I think this Maryland team has 7 transfers on it. She really revamped that roster from a season ago. Cheyenne Sellers is still the bus driver here. Really great player, who battled some injury stuff this season, but has seemed to be playing really well lately. Maryland is a team that's capable of scoring a whole lot of points. They hung 85 or so on Duke earlier this year, and I just talked about how good Duke's defense is this season. That game against Alabama, that finished in the hundreds, right? Maryland is also, I think the other key for Maryland is South Carolina. We always talk about their depth and how deep they go into the bench. Maryland goes pretty deep too. This is a team that plays a 7, 8, 9 player rotation. They go pretty deep into the bench. I would give Brenda Freese a chance. I saw earlier this week that the line was like 17.5. If I was to give someone some gambling advice, I would pick Maryland to cover. I don't anticipate Brenda Freese getting blown out in this game.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, I've been paying attention to the defending champs, and my observation is just it doesn't seem like they have a consistent number one option, especially with the way in which Dawn Staley uses Malaysia Fulwiley. I mean, there's situations where Chloe Kitts can just sort of carry them, but then there are other games where she's not shooting well. And then it's sort of hard to see, okay, well, what are the other ways she can contribute? Sanaya Fagan, I think, is a great WNBA prospect, but she's going to be a fantastic role player. She's not, as you were saying, an Asia, an Aaliyah Boston, she's not, defensively a force like Ashlyn Watkins. So I'm going to be really curious to see when these games get tight, and I think it's more honest than not, that's potentially what we could see happening. Who is going to step up? Who is going to take over the game? That's really my question with South Carolina.
Yeah, and this is a team that their leading scorer is Joyce Edwards, the freshman who comes in off the bench. We haven't seen South Carolina in a ton of situations this year where like the game is tight, at the end of regulation, and they really need a bucket, or they really need someone to take over. We haven't quite seen them in that situation so far this year. I think that Malaysia Fulwiley could be that player who takes over. This team is so deep, and Dawn, has a really balanced rotation. I mean, nobody on this team averages more than 25 minutes a game, and that's Te-Hina Pau. And then you have a bunch of others averaging 23, 19, 18. here and there. So, I think Malaysia Fulwiley is the most talented player on this roster, just in terms of like pure basketball skill and, someone who is really fun to watch. I think Chloe Kitts has been, over the last month, probably their most consistent player. I think she scored in double figures in 7 straight games or something like that. She was the MVP of the SEC tournament, and has played really well. I think Tessa Johnson is somebody who, given the opportunity, could be that sort of bus driver for South Carolina. But yeah, there's really not an alpha here. And so I do wonder if they get into a tight situation, like they did, I look back to a season ago where, they're down against Tennessee in the SEC tournament and Camila Cardozo saves the day. So you don't have somebody who you can just say, well, we'll just give the ball to Camila and go get us a bucket. You don't really have that player on the roster this year. So I do wonder kind of what happens if and when they get into those sort of situations.
I mean, I do too. I mean, we will have to see when this tips off. Well, thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen today. I want to give a huge thank you to Mitch for hopping on the show. I know it's a little chaotic down there in Birmingham before the action gets started, so I really appreciate you making some time. Where can everyone find you and your great work?
Yeah, happy to come on anytime. You can find me on Twitter at Primetime Mitch. I'm also on Blue Sky. You can find me there. Instagram, Primetime Mitch as well. And yeah, I'm at SB Nation's Breakaway, where I'm covering women's college basketball and all things women's college sports. So you can head over there and check out some of my work. I've done some stories recently about Simone Augustus and about Tia Jackson, and I did an interview with Reagan Beers about, the player advocacy group that she's a part of. So yeah, go over there and check some of that stuff out.
Really good work over there, folks.
Thank you.
Go over there. And also, if you want to listen to a preview of the Spokane matchups that also begin today, Chelsea and Bella have you covered. That link will be in the show notes to their show.
Also, I just want to mention, I'm also on the Women's Basketball Podcast once a week with my friend Mia O'Brien. So you can check that out. New episodes on Wednesdays.
I will put that in the show notes too. But anyway, this has been Jackie Powell and
Mitch.
And we are signing off. Enjoy the Sweet 16.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.